Hello, AP Gov, and we now start our second unit. It is entitled Foundations of American Democracy. So now that we have Unit 1 behind us, which is sort of the basics of government in general, for instance, what do governments do? Where do different governments place power? What are the different labels of political ideologies? And what do parties do in general? And what is the voting in America like? Now we're going to get into the more specifics about how was American government developed. So we're going to go from the very broad to the very specific. This unit best sets up as a flow chart. And so everything that we're going to show you on this screen is basically what we're going to cover in this unit. You just need to know that previous to America and having the Constitution, there were some other old school social contracts out there, namely the Magna Carta and the Mayflower Compact, which then influences our development of the American Constitution. And these, the Magna Carta obviously comes before the guys that I'm about to talk about, which is Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. And really, the gentleman that I want you to focus on the most when we're doing this quick review of those three is Locke. Locke is going to have sort of the biggest influence in America. And so we're going to go over the ideas of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau tonight on Monday night, and then we'll get into all the other stuff starting tomorrow. America's story starts with the British slapping a bunch of taxes on us. Those taxes were called the Intolerable Acts because they just were totally intolerable for us. Namely, this was the Tea Act, which then causes the Boston Tea Party to occur, and then later the Stamp Act, which was basically just a tax that we had to stamp stamps on everything. Those acts eventually get America thinking about independence, and that comes about through Thomas Paine and Common Sense, where he basically writes an argument that it is common sense for America to think about breaking away from Great Britain. That has a huge impact on American society because it was so well written and understandably written that it was very influential in pushing us toward looking at independence. And that eventually is the foreshadowing of the Declaration of Independence. And that's what we're going to spend our next day on. We're going to take a look and break down our first foundational document. So on Tuesday, make sure that you have this printed out so that we can go over it and highlight it and dissect it. You can either have it printed out in physical form or be able to manipulate it, highlight it, and make comments on it digitally. You can use Cami for that, or you can just have it opened up as a Google Doc and highlight and make comments on the side. But tomorrow we're going to spend the day looking at the Declaration of Independence. That obviously leads to the Revolutionary War. And so when we have the Revolutionary War, we need a government because we are no longer under Great Britain. Well, we form the Articles of Confederation. And so when we study the Articles of Confederation, we're going to study what kind of government did it set up. And then because of that setup, what were its major weaknesses? And so those are the two elements that you're going to focus on when we study the Articles of Confederation. And this is going to be foundational document number 2 that we're going to kind of break down, although we're not going to take a look at it as deeply as other things. But we will break it down a little bit so that you can at least understand, again, the setup of the government and the weaknesses of the government. We eventually win the war. And so then we will later on, because of all of these weaknesses, we're going to take a look at possibly changing or getting rid of the articles. That first meeting was supposed to happen at Annapolis, Maryland, but not enough people showed up. And so they decided to postpone and move it to Philadelphia, where they thought they would get more people to show up, which they did. And that Philadelphia Convention ends up coming into or becoming the Constitutional Convention, where we actually look to develop a new social contract. We're going to agree to scrap the Articles of Confederation and rewrite things to make things a little bit better for us. At the Constitutional Convention, we are going to basically break down the people that attend into two groups, Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and perhaps you've heard of them before. Some of those Federalists are James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, and you know that they, along with John Jay, will write a series of essays that are going to basically defend this new Constitution and tell everybody to accept it, and those papers are called the Federalist Papers. Alexander Hamilton writes over 50, Madison writes 20-some, and then John Jay writes 5. We're going to study 4 of those over the course of this unit. We're going to study 2 of them in this, 2 of them in this unit. Federalist 10 and Federalist 51, both written by Madison. But then we're also going to study the Anti-Federalists write a series of papers, and we're going to study one of those called Brutus I. So there's another 3 foundational documents that we're going to get into, and those you're going to dissect more on your own, and we'll talk about that later. Because the Federalists and Anti-Federalists have different views about government, in order to come up with a final solution, they're going to have to compromise on a whole bunch of different issues. And so one of the other things that we're going to take a look at are the different issues where we compromise. And it is stated that our government is actually a government of compromise, and we're going to kind of prove that fact with a look at the constitutional compromises that were made between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Ultimately, we are going to create the Constitution, and we're going to take a look at it. There are some principles of the Constitution that it upholds. One of those principles that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper is the principle of federalism, the fact that we have different levels of government, federal, state, and local. Why do we have that? And they will explain that. And then we're also going to take a look at how that impacts our government. And one of the ways it impacts our government is that there's a constant question of whose job is it? Is it the federal government's job? Is it the state's government's job? And sometimes there are court cases that help decide those issues. And so we're also, this unit, going to get introduced to 2 of the 15 Supreme Court decisions that we're going to have to know. And both of those deal with federalism. And so we're going to take a look at those court cases and sort of dissect them a little bit. And we're going to go into the concept of federalism and discuss how that impacts today. If you have heard anything about the COVID stuff that's been going on, one of the questions is, should the government be taking more of a lead role in figuring things out, or should that be up to the states? And if you leave it up to the states, then you have different states doing different things, and so therefore there's no uniform approach. Is that good or bad? These are all the things that a look at federalism will get us into. And then finally, we will also do a little schoolhouse rock and take a look at this preamble of the Constitution. So this is the course, this is the unit in a nutshell. It basically is going to cover these things. Tonight I'm going to post the new syllabus so that it'll introduce you to the new words, and it'll introduce you to the unit objectives and the foundational documents and Supreme Court cases that we're going to go over. And it will also kind of lay things out for this unit. This unit's going to be a little bit longer, but we still got to test relatively quickly, so you just got to make sure that you stay on top of things. And so that's a little bit of a preview. Tonight you're also going to watch a little review video of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. Again, when you do that, I want you to focus primarily on Locke. He is the major one of the 3 that I want you to know, because he has the greatest influence on Jefferson and America. So that's my little review for you. I hope you did well on today's test, and I will see you later.